Hello, I'm Jesse with American Radon Mitigation. I'm here back at my cousin Mike's house, and we did some radon testing with the eco trackers yesterday. He's in the middle of a remodel project, and we are going to start putting in phase one of the radon system. So what we had for results yesterday was about a 15 picocuries in the well room right there. In this room, in the basement, what we're calling the basement, we've got a 3.2. In the kitchen, we ended up with around 2.1. And in the entryway, we've got 1.7 picocuries. So phase one, we're gonna start with treating the well room and the basement here. And then we're gonna leave those eco trackers run and see what our radon levels do once we get this system, or at least these two legs of the system up and running. We can always pick up this portion of the kitchen. This is a block wall behind here, and there's likely gonna be a lot of settling back here. So what I could do in the mechanical room is possibly put a T in the system, and then we can come up and over the ceiling. Since he's still got a little bit of drywall work here, he could do some patching. We can drop down into where the furnace is in here. It's gonna be tight. Hopefully we don't have to do it, but we could potentially get into that settling that's on the other side of this block wall, which is slab on grade up there as well. So we're gonna get started with sealing the sump cover. And then I can do some diagnostics, and we'll see if applying suction in that wall room reaches here, and if we need to do any stitching under the footing, if there is a footing that runs between the wall room and the basement here. So let's get started. The sump obviously needs to be replaced, the lid for it anyways, because we want to make this airtight. I'm gonna try to save Mike a little bit of money. I've got this one in my van that I pulled off of a job a few months ago, and we'll try to see if we can reuse this. We do need to add a 4-inch access port, and then I'll add a water alarm for him so that he knows when the sump fails. And there is no drain tile coming into it. It's simply a sump basket. So think of like this bucket with a bunch of holes drilled into it to allow water to just kind of seep into it. Now this is clay country, but it looks like there's a bunch of sand that is kind of seeped into the bottom of this sump. So hopefully we're sandy soil here, or at least where the house is, so we can get better pressure field extension. So that is full of sand. So I am going to take that out, and we'll get going on the cover. This is 7 inches over for my cover to the center of this pipe. So I think we should be able to make this one because it's pretty darn close. It's about 7.5. So we might have some wiggle room where we can adjust this over to use this cover and make everything line up. All right, so I got to take this apart and I'll pull that sump out. I did test it, it is working. Nothing worse than sealing up a sump that isn't working. So we'll get started with that. So when you do have a check valve, I almost probably made a big mistake there by loosening that up because this pipe's probably full of water. So you always want to loosen up below the cover if that looks like that is starting to drip. So I'll let that drip and drain. I'm going to suck us out some of that sand out, so I'm not sucking mud out. All right, we got that cleaned out. Just a plastic disc to raise that up a ½ inch or so. And then I know we've had a few people ask about the bucket vac setup we've got here. I'm gonna copy this from Jack Bartholomew, who was my entry-level teacher back in 2014. Here's my intake, so it comes in from the end of the vacuum hose here, drops in the bucket, and then this is where it goes out to the vacuum. So the idea is it just drops everything in the bottom of the bucket and very little actually ends up out in the vacuum. And the reason I got this one a little bit longer is so that it plugs rather than starting to suck all the sand in the vacuum hose, because we usually have like 35 feet of hose on here. So that's how that works. I'm gonna snap on a new bucket because this one's gonna be heavy because it's got a bunch of water in it too. Now that I've got that kind of cleaned out, I can set that sump back in there and try to get everything to kind of line up. Typically this would be easier to do with a new cover, which I might end up putting on, but I'm trying to make everything kind of line up with that cover so that we can save Mike a little bit of money. So I know we're 7 inches over from about right here, and it'd be cool if we could make the holes and everything line up too. So I've got to put a 4-inch access port in here. Typically we'd use a grommet for the 1.5-inch pipe coming out and for the cords, but in this case we can just silicone around this. And then the access port, typically we want to put that where we can get down with a nut driver to be able to take that sump apart so we can let it drain down there versus up here. So put it in a spot where you'll be able to reach everything, not kind of out of the way. You always want to make sure you have a check valve, which we do in this case. Otherwise you'd be pulling air from outside, cold air in the winter. It's like 0 degrees right now, and you could freeze up the sump area. Plus you lose suction outside. Looks like that will work. Just slide this over a little bit. And one big thing with these sumps is you want to make sure that this does not, it's not able to get caught on the side of the tank here. Like if I had it like this thing would never turn on and it would flood. So sometimes we've got to adjust these. Sometimes we shorten them up so it doesn't have such a long throw. I like the ones that are on the rod with kind of that float that just moves vertically because it's a lot less likely to hang up on something. But I'm just a radon guy, I don't know a lot about sumps, so ask a professional. All right, so I want to figure out where to put my access port so I can put all this stuff back together. So if our sump is like that, and we've got that there, I think I'm going to want to be about right here with my access port, which would give me room to go down in there and get the nut driver on the rubber coupler. So I will mark that and then we'll cut it. Normally I would do this outside or in the basement, but we'll do it so you can see it. All right, we're left with our 4-inch hole, and this is our access port. So this will go into there, and then we'll tighten up the red nut, and it'll squish this rubber donut out, making an airtight seal. And then that's our access port. So you can pull up on the float and stuff and check, make sure it's working. And in our case, we'll be able to disconnect that. Now we've got a water alarm. I like to check these. We use the dual sensor water alarms a lot, but this is the one I had, and this is the one that Mike's gonna get. So I just make that connection. I've had a few of these not work, like 2 in the last 7 years. And I'd rather find that out now versus once I put it all together. So the alarm works. Then we can get the wiring through, or the cords through the hole. One thing about the Lexan covers is they are a lot easier because you can see what you're doing versus trying to look through that hole or that hole. And I think what I'm going to do too is put this rubber coupler on the check valve here. So I just have to tighten up the one that goes to the pipe. And I'm going to flip these around so that they face that access port so they'll be easier to get at. I'll snug that up just a little bit so it doesn't fall down while I'm trying to get the pipe on it. And since this is gonna get silicone on it, we'll try to clean up where it's gonna seal. I'm going to tighten up the zip tie that is on the cords now that I've got all the slack pulled out. And then I just want to adjust my water alarm so that one, I can see it, and then two, I want it at a height that's not low enough or not too low that it gets set off before the sump kicks on. But I also want it low enough where it's going to give an early warning so it's not beeping right before the basement floods. And you can kind of use the, this pipe has got iron all over it so you can see what level that water gets up to. So I'm going to set it just above that. And then I'm going to put a zip tie just on that water alarm again to kind of take some of that adjustment out of it. And then before I forget, I'm going to tighten these up. All right, so now I just want to tighten the rubber coupler down here. Ensure that it's seated all the way, which it is. Double check that that float won't hit, which it won't. So it'd also be a good time to replace the sump, especially if it's one that runs a lot. And then the only thing I got left to do is mount this to the wall. I'll probably do that later off camera. Just drill 2 holes there and screw that to the wall there. But for now it's gonna live there, and then I can get this cover on and run some silicone on it. So here's the hardware from the old cover. Can reuse that. So the only thing we got left to do is put the cover in, or the test plug. Like I said, that as that tightens, it squishes this out and forms a tight seal. There we go, and we just need a radon system sticker on that as well. So now we're ready to get on with the rest of the system. All right, so now that I've got the sump sealed, I want to figure out where I want to put my suction point. And rather than have a bunch of pipe kind of jigger around here, I'm going to go outside and find where I want my pipe to come out the side of the step here, and then I'll be able to hopefully just core a hole straight in. So we'll have a suction point down here somewhere. I got to see if the footing runs solid through here. I may drill a hole through here. If I get 12 inches of concrete, I know that the footing comes solid through here. It may be open where it would allow me to reach out into the rest of the basement without having to stitch this. So hopefully that's the case. But anyways, our pipe's gonna come up and then we'll go out the side of the step here. So let's go take a look at that now. All right, well, that well room is below the steps here. So we're gonna come out the side right about there and then hopefully run up and kind of tuck it in. Hopefully tuck that pipe in right in there, because that'll kind of hide it from the road as best we can. Unfortunately, there's no closet or attic space to put the pipe in, and we'll kind of weave it between that beam and the right side of the window there. So to mock this up, what I did was just take this 10-foot stick of pipe with the 90 on the bottom. I set it against the house like that, and then just marked, where I want that hole to be. So that should hopefully give me everything I want as far as lining up. And now I'm just going to drill a pilot hole through this rock face, and then that'll show me where I want to be down in the basement. I also want a 1/4 inch of pitch on this downward. All right, so I got my hole drilled. Sorry I did that just barely on camera. So I've got this long pilot bit. It's maybe 18 inches long. Poked through, hopefully that poked out into that well room. So we'll go take a look at that now. All right, so back in the well room, you can see where we poked through here. So from there, we're just gonna run straight down and go somewhere probably by my glove with the suction point. That'll be our next step. All right, so now we're gonna drill my diagnostic test holes. The well room is over there, so that when we apply suction in that well room, we'll be able to see if we're reaching over here. So I'm gonna do one over in that corner, because that's kitty corner, so furthest from where our suction point's gonna be, but there might be some settling next to the footing. So I'm gonna do an undisturbed area too, so I'll put a test hole right in this area as well. So we'll have 2 test holes in this area. Then I'll put one in the well room as well. So this spot definitely felt like they were settling over in the corner. You could feel when my bit got through the bottom of the concrete, it kind of fell maybe 3 or 4 inches. Where this was, it felt more like clay. I didn't really feel it drop down at all. And one thing you want to watch with clay is that you don't drill down too deep and then pull back up and have that clay kind of suck and seal that hole where you have a dead hole. So now I'm going to move to the well room and drill a couple holes in there. All right, now here in the well room, I'm going to drill a hole here to see if the footing does run through. If the concrete's, a foot thick, I know we'll probably have to stitch this. And then I'm going to drill a test hole back over there, because that'll be opposite of our suction point, which is going to be right here. So unfortunately, it looks like that footing runs through. We were probably 16 inches down and didn't feel it go through. So next I'm going to drill my test hole. It looks like we'll have to stitch this. If we don't get any communication out here, hopefully we do. Okay, so this is where we're going to go outside, hopefully. And I'm going to come off this wall about 9 inches and go down so that I miss the footing here. And I'm going to drill a hole just to ensure that I don't hit footing. So what I've done is set this laser up, going this way, and right at my hole here, it's 16 3/4 inches off this wall. And then I just move my laser back and go 16 3/4 off this wall. So I know that everything is, perpendicular to this wall, and it should have lined up nice for us. So that laser just gives me a spot of where I'm going to go down through the floor there. So we'll drill a test hole there, and then we can apply suction to that and see if we reach out in that area. All right, so now that I've got all my test holes drilled, I'm going to install our tubing to our micromanometers from our test holes so that we can measure our pressure field extension. So that's just going to plug in there, that rubber stopper into that 1/2 inch test hole. So I like to hook these up in the order I have them on my drawing. So here's the drawing I've got. So we've got the well room here, my first test hole, and then we've got the stairway, which is right there. And then test hole 2 and 3, or sorry, 2 and 3. So I'll hook my tubing up in that direction, and then it just makes it easy for me as I'm writing everything down. So this is our baseline reading with no suction, and then we'll apply suction and take our readings again. All right, so for our baseline readings on test hole 1, which is in the well room, looks like that furnace blower might affect these numbers too. But right now with the furnace on, we've got positive 1.4 pascals. Test hole 2, which is in the corner there, we've got positive 0.6. And test hole 3, which is right here, we'll call it 0 since it's bouncing back and forth. Okay, now when I apply suction to where our test hole might be, or not our test hole, but where our suction point might be. We'll see what these numbers do. All right, so I'm sucking on that test hole. We'll see what it does for our numbers over here. So we clearly have the well room. We're reaching in the corner over there, and we're reaching right here too. So we got lots of settling under there, and that might take care of our problem. We will now core a hole over there and run this test again with our pitot tube. All right, now we're ready to core a hole. So I got my 5-inch core bit on the 1/2-inch test hole that I drilled earlier, and we are ready to drill the hole. All right, so there's our hole. We do have a few inches of settling at least, so we'll take and clean that up, and then we'll hook up our pitot tube. We got sand here, which is a good sign. That's probably why we're reaching on the other side of the basement, even through the footing. That settling is pretty much as far as I can reach with the screwdriver. It feels like it's maybe an inch or two of settling in that direction, and a little bit tighter here, and then some more settling over that way. We just want to create a pit that gives us a lot of surface area to draw from, and obviously you don't have to dig as big of a pit when they're settling, because it's like one gigantic pit that's already dug for you. I do feel that footing that's running through between the house and this well room. Kind of the general rule of thumb is for a pit too, the harder it is to dig, the more you should take. So if it's clay and there's not really any settling, you should take longer to dig that pit, or dig a bigger pit. Whereas here, I'm probably already bigger than I really need to be. But a big pit for the most part never really works against you. Bigger's better in this instance usually. The bigger you dig your pit, the less resistance there is to airflow to it, and that means your fan doesn't have to work so hard. So you could use a smaller fan that's going to be quieter and consume less energy. All right, we do have a small floor wall joint running around here, but it's very small, so I'll seal that at some point. Now I want to hook up my pitot tube and see how much air I'm moving and how much suction I need to apply to reach the other side of the basement. So that's what we'll do next. All right, so I like to bring my micromanometers back to my suction point if I got enough tubing to do so. So we have that in this instance. So I still got test hole 1, which is in the well room with me, test hole 2, which is in the corner out in the basement, and then test hole 3, which is in the more central in the basement. So I've got the Kansas State University pitot tube hooked up. This allows us to measure how much air we're moving, so the CFM. And then I can also get a makeshift static pressure off of this too. This doesn't work really well when you've got high airflow, but for this it's going to be good enough. So this is with no suction. I'll turn on the shop vac, and then with this valve we can adjust the airflow. I am going to manipulate this valve to get the airflow or the negative pressure we're looking for there. So this is with a dirty shop vac filter and no sealing yet. We can get 10 pascals in our weakest test hole, and that's applying 4 inches of suction. So that's overkill. We don't need that much. So we're going to dial it down. I think we're going to shoot for maybe -5 in our weakest test hole. So we've got 5 pascals in our weakest test hole, which is on the other side of the basement. And we're applying 1.7 inches of suction or static pressure to do that. So I'll write these numbers down. So I just call it Mach SP for suction point 1. And then under static, I'm going to write 1.7 inches. I've got 360 pascals in the well room, negative, call it -5. Out on test hole 2 in the corner, and -9 pascals in the center of the basement. Now to get my CFM, so this is hooked up to my static pressure port. I hook up to my total pressure port on the same channel of the micromanometer. So now these two are both hooked up to the same channel here. I'm going to switch to pascals. So I've got 26 pascals. I'm going to go over to my chart here, and down at the bottom, I'm going to go, probably a little bit hard to see, but 26 pascals is about right here. We're going through a 2-inch pipe, which is this blue line, and I'm going to go over, and we've got about, maybe 28 CFM. So I've got my 3 pieces of information I need. To get my target number or my target pressure field extension, I need to move 28 CFM, and I need to apply 1.7 inches of suction to do that. So to see what fan can do that, I've got the fan curves. These are from Bill Broadhead's website, so WPBRadon.com, and then go to his fan curves. He's got tons of great information there. So I'm going to go to my 1.7 inch line. So 1.7 inches of static pressure, and then 25 CFM. So I'm going to go over, and my plot point, which is about right here, has to fall below these fans. So like an RP 145 would be somewhere in this range. It wouldn't quite work. It'd be kind of right on the threshold. It might work, but we can maybe make this pit a little bit better because we've got overkill suction in here. I could take an auger under this footing, and that might allow us to draw a lot better from there, just by taking the extra 20 minutes or a half hour that it takes to auger over under the footing, and we can run this test again. I'd like to be able to use the smallest fan as possible, and this will give me the best chance of being able to do that versus like an RP 145 or a Maverick or an RN2 being right on the cusp. Maybe we can step it down a little bit further. It is winter, so the days are short. So I've got Mike here now. I might take and core this hole while I got Mike. Now that I know that a 3-inch pipe would be sufficient here, because we're only moving 25 CFM. So 4 inches overkill. We could run 4-inch, but I think for the levels we've got here, even if we have to add another suction point, 3 inches is probably going to be plenty here. So we'll run 3-inch outside and then switch to 4-inch because it's less likely to freeze. So that'll be my next step. All right, so I got a helper. Reed, can you say hi?
Hi.
You might see his hand in the shot. So I am back outside where we recorded our hole, and I got the spider bit, which is carbide. So I started a hole through the stone here, and I'm going to switch over to my coring bit. And what is it, like 5 degrees out? We're going to see how it works to spray water on this. All right, so there's our hole going to outside. And we're just going to block that for now because it's cold out. So now we'll see if we can optimize this by going under that footing and getting into the basement area so our fan doesn't have to apply so much suction to reach over there. We can dial everything down. So this is optimal mitigation. Don't need to do this, but could make it better. So we got a big rock in the way here. I think it's a big rock anyways. That's prevent me from getting kind of pointed under that footing. I think it might be a big concrete pipe, maybe yay big along. All right, so we're about to run this pitot tube test again. And there's that drain tile that I found. So it looks like it's maybe 10 inches in diameter. And you can see that little slit looks like a saw cut. Looks like it's just butted together. And it runs under the footing. And I can feel it runs over towards that sump. So I don't know, that sump obviously isn't from 1947. But maybe they just, well, obviously they just have holes drilled into it. So I don't know if that drain tile just comes here and stops and maybe continues all the way around the house. But the idea is that it gets in that sump basket, I'm guessing. So we'll run this pitot tube test again and see if that little bit of extra digging helped us out. I was trying to get further that direction, but the footing is, the bottom of the footing is right there. So there's only like a, I don't know, a 1 inch gap between that pipe and the footing. So I can't stitch that. All right, so we're gonna check that pressure field extension again. So I'm hooking up my 2-inch pitot tube, which is this again. And there we've got our numbers without any suction. So I'm gonna dial this back down a little bit to 5 again. Looks like our PFE did get a little bit stronger at first glance anyways. So I'm trying to achieve 5 on my weakest test hole there. And this slide gate valve here is how I do that. So we're right at 5 again. And you can see we dropped from, before it required 1.7 inches of static pressure to get 5 pascals, and now we require 1.6. So it did improve a little bit. So static is 1.6 inches. We got 340 pascals on test hole 1, and before we had 360. Test hole 2 we got 5, and test hole 3 we got 8.7, and we had 9 before. And then we'll figure out our CFM. Probably gonna be close to the same. We'll switch this back to pascals. And I think 26 is what we had there before. So yeah, we still have the same 28 CFM. So now I'm wondering if I cut into the top of that 10-inch drain tile, is that gonna make these numbers better or worse? If I core through that and tie into that drain tile, exterior drain tile, I don't have a good way to plug that back up if it proves to not be a good solution here. So we're gonna run it this way. We can always cut this pipe out and do that if we want, or we could always run that simulation going through the sump, because all that settling that was, or the sand that was washed into the sump, we might be able to, guessing there's a lot of settling around that. So we might be able to just cut a hole in the sump and get the same effect as pulling into that drain tile. We're gonna run the pipe up here, get it mocked up, and I'm gonna get out of here in the next couple hours, hopefully, because it's dark out. All right, running pipe time. All right, now I am ready to run the pipe outside through our hole. So I've got this mocked up, or it's not mocked up, it's glued. So we got a T here and a cap on it, so we can take that cap off and add to this if we need to go over by the furnace like we talked about earlier. And then this I just got here for some more support so it's not wiggling around so much. We got tons of pitch on that. I wish I didn't have so much, but it's hard to tell outside when you're drilling the hole. So now I just need to measure down to what I got on the ground here, and I can cut and glue this. I like to just get this in here and mocked up. This shim will help hold it in place. And then I've got some leeway to go up or down with this measurement. We're gonna measure from our pipe up above down to here, and looks like 67 inches will take us there. And then I want a chunk of 4-inch pipe just to sit down below the surface of this slab. so that it's not condensation, doesn't get the slab all wet. So I want 67 for that, and I'll just measure like this. So I'm going to go about 5 inches on that 4-inch piece, which is about what we got there. So we'll go with that. All right, so now we are ready to glue this 4-inch chunk on. So we go primer on the fitting, and then primer on the pipe. You want to get rid of the words if you can, or so I've been told. And then you hit the fitting one more time with the primer. We're using clear OD primer here. And then for the glue, you hit the pipe once. Also been told you want to hit the end. Hit the fitting once. And then the pipe one more time. And here's what we're using. All weather medium clear PVC. This is good to 15 degrees below Fahrenheit. You want to give it a quarter turn as you push. And then this, I'm going to push this down through the hole and then come back up, because I've got no wiggle room on that guy. So we'll glue the bottom piece of pipe in next. You can see all those words, that ink disappears. This does take longer to set up when it's cold. So look, it's still pushing apart. And I could put a valve in here, or a damper, but we're going to be able to pull gobs of air from the suction point over there if we end up adding that. So this, even if I did have a valve here, it would very likely stay open. So we're not going to put one here. I might want one on the other end if we do that, just because all the settling that's likely there. Okay, now we can put this down in the hole. And then we'll glue this piece. I want to twist this a quarter turn. I like to have my words face where you can't see them on the pipe. I think it just looks nicer. We're not like plumbers and have to have them showing. And I just got to tap this in to plumb it up. So here's how I like to secure the bottom part. I put a shim in there. I've got it plumb and pitched and everything the way I want it. I'm just going to tap this shim in. It's a composite shim. I'm going to score it flush with the concrete. Snap it off. And then I'm going to push it down the rest of the way, or below the surface. And then I just run a bead of radon sealant around it. And we'll just throw a fan on outside. I'm not going to run the pipe up or anything, but just have the temporary system up and running. And we'll see what this does for the radon levels. All right, so I'm mocked up outside. None of this is glued. It's all just temporary. It's cold out. I can't hardly get that fitting on that rubber coupler. And then we're going with an RN2, which would be the equivalent of like an RP 145 or a Maverick, Festa Maverick. And according to our diagnostics, this should get us close to 5 pascals in our weakest test hole. Granted, we've got the window open and we're doing our PFE today. So that's going to make it, it's going to get a little bit worse once we close that window for PFE. Days like this, I wonder why we live in Minnesota. I guess you don't live in Minnesota, but I do. Our pipe is literally just going to run straight up, no fittings needed here. We're just going to blow it away from the house for now. This railing is pretty covered in ice. Alright, so we are up and running. We'll check our PFE in the basement and I'm going to get the heck out of here. Alright, so we've got our temporary system up and running. Like I said, we've got the RN2 stubbed in out there. So we've got that up and running. What we got for PFE, granted we still got to run the 12 to 15 feet of pipe to get up above the fan, above the roof there. But we've got 393 pascals negative in the well room. We've got 5.3 pascals negative in the corner of the basement. And then out towards the middle of the basement, we've got 9.3 pascals negative. So we hit the numbers we were looking for. We didn't have to guess fans or anything, just because we did a little bit of diagnostics on the front end, and our numbers in the fan curve chart, thanks to Bill Broadhead, told us what fan we needed. So no swapping back and forth like I used to do. So it does slow down the process, but it also speeds it up in some ways as well. So I'm going to wrap for tonight. What we've got left to do is add the manometer, the system alarm, seal these cracks, so our PFE is going to get a little bit better once we seal the cracks in the floor here. Seal probably the floor to wall joint in the well room, and we'll wrap up from there. Also, I've got my eco tracker set up, so I'll probably switch those to continuous radon monitor mode, and we'll just let that run and see what the radon levels do over the course of the next few days. That's a wrap for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. Are you a radon mitigation contractor that would like to be more confident when giving estimates or installing a mitigation system? Would you like to reduce callbacks and stand out from your competitors? Would you like to offer more value to the families you serve? If so, we have a hands-on radon course coming up where we are going to focus on optimal mitigation, pressure field extension testing, suction point placement, pipe size, fan selection, and the effects of sealing. To sign up for our course, click the link in the description below. I'm Jesse with American Radon Mitigation. Thank you so much for watching.